In 1863, an extraordinary event took place within the walls of the St. Petersburg Academy of Arts. At the final stage of their studies, 14 of the best students submitted a request for termination. This was the first and in fact the only time such an event occurred in the entire history of this prestigious educational institution. We need to delve a bit deeper into history in order to understand what drove these talented students to take such a drastic step. The Academy of Arts began its activities in Russia in the mid-18th century, during the reign of the Empress Elizabeth the Great. The entire educational system at that time was based on classical European models, and the first teachers themselves were foreign. The best graduating students were granted the right to compete for the Grand Gold Medal, which included a state-sponsored trip to Italy, akin to what we now call an internship. This was, of course, very honorable and prestigious. The theme for this competition was determined each year by the Academy's administration and was always related to exalted mythological subjects. At this time, the contenders for the Grand Gold Medal were tasked with creating a painting based on a theme from Germanic Scandinavian mythology, Odin's feast in Valhalla. The students vehemently protested against this assignment. The thing is, since the mid-19th century, there was a process aimed at drawing attention to Russia's significant lag behind the European world in terms of economy, industry, living standards, culture, and other aspects among Russian intellectuals and cultural figures.
We chat, eat, sleep, and chit-chat again, and with a totally clear conscience. We think ourselves Europeans, but our culture is very Asiatic.
The issue was that a large part of the population of the Russian Empire consisted of serfs, who were still in serfdom, essentially being the personal property of the landowners. Poverty and inhumane living conditions of almost the entire population were hindering the country's development. This issue provoked sharp reaction from public figures, thinkers, and writers. Literary magazines published exposés, stories, and poems that portrayed the harsh realities of the commoners' lives without embellishment, depicting their poverty and hopelessness in full. So, a new direction emerged in Russian art called critical realism. Its main task became to portray reality in the most truthful form, exposing all the blemishes of the society, emphasizing everything that needed correction. Finally, in 1861, the serfdom was emancipated by the edict of the Emperor Alexander II. But the progress of the reform was screeching slow and painful. Feeling the spirit of the times, the students of the Academy of Arts could not remain on the sidelines. Against the backdrop of the affairs of the state, the theme of the competition seemed almost offensive to them, and the top 14 students demanded the opportunity to write their competition entry on a more relevant and contemporary subject of their own choosing. The institution's administration saw this as a violation of academic traditions and refused their request. And then the young artists withdrew from the competition, effectively ending it. This bold action later became known as the Revolt of the 14. The leader of the revolt was Ivan Kramskoy. The friends formed an artel of artists. That is, a group where it was thought everyone would work together, collaborate in management, and evenly distribute commissions and earnings. But even more importantly is that they chose critical realism as the main direction of their artistic endeavors. This union, known as the Artel, did not last long. However, after dissolution, the tireless Ivan Kramskoy once again gathered like-minded individuals around him, proposing to form a creative group of a new type with its own charter. Thus, the Society of Wandering Art Exhibitions was born, or simply the Wanderers, in Russian Peredvizhniki. Why such a name? Because the artists who joined this community wanted their works to be seen not only by audiences in the capital city, but also by residents of distant provinces. Their most important task became bringing enlightenment. Painting was meant to reach the widest audiences, introducing them to art. Of course, it was necessary to transport the exhibits into the regions, wandering from place to place, moving them from one city to another, thus the origins of the name. Interestingly, the first wandering exhibition opened precisely at the St. Petersburg Academy of Arts, where the Revolt of the 14 had occurred. This exhibition became a significant event in the artistic life of Russia. It featured 47 works by 16 painters. During their existence, the Peredvizhniki held 48 major exhibitions in large cities of the Russian Empire, including St. Petersburg, Moscow, Voronezh, Kursk, Kharkov, Kiev, Odessa, Poltava, Yaroslavl, Tula, Vilna, Riga, Saratov, Kazan, Chisinau, and others. In addition, simultaneous exhibitions consisting of paintings from previous years toured many provincial cities. At the beginning of the 20th century, they even began organizing people's exhibitions, which were displayed in villages and townships. It's worth noting that the Передвижники also achieved success thanks to glowing reviews in the press. Indeed, a zealous agitator of the society's endeavors was the prominent art critic Vladimir Vasilievich Stasov, who not only covered their activities in the press, but also suggested current themes to the artist and provided important advice during the creation of their paintings. Today, he would be called a producer.
Give us the uniquely Russian realistic art.
The Society of Передвижники essentially represents a constellation of the finest artists of that time. It included Ivan Kramskoy, Grigory Mesaedov, Vasily Perov, Alexei Savrasov, Ivan Shishkin, Konstantin Savitsky, Ilya Repin, Nikolai Ge, Vasily Polenov, and brothers Vasily and Konstantin Makovsky, Viktor Vasnitsov, Vasily Surikov, Nikolai Yeroshenko, Arkhip Quinji, Isaac Levitan, Valentin Syrov, and many, many others. The Передвижники covered a wide range of genres in their artworks. The favorite genre for most artists became everyday life scenes, where they could reflect contemporary themes, expose all the sores of society, and attempt to fix the reality. Perhaps the most successful one in this endeavor was Vasily Perov. His early work struck with the depth of their themes, piercing observations, precision in choosing types and characters, sincere emotional perception, and uncompromising attitude towards the unjust and ugly social structure. For example, his Easter procession in the village depicts the bleak life of a peasant community where spirituality has been replaced by vulgarity. For the depicted characters, what matters most is not the holiness of the day itself, but an opportunity to party. Everything seems as if it's been soiled, not just dirty with mud, but tangibly soiled. Here's his famous Troika. The painting ruthlessly exposes the powerlessness of children essentially deprived of their childhood. They're forced to work hard under inhumane conditions with no hope in sight. In the painting Last Journey, we literally feel the weight of the sloped back of the peasant woman whose husband, the breadwinner, just died. She is now alone with two very young children, and sorrowfully a gaunt mare pulls the sleigh as haunched as the widow herself. The sense of melancholy intensifies with the gray-brown color scheme, realistically depicting the gloomy sky, gray snow, bare trees, and a howling dog accompanying its master on his last journey. The paintings of the Передвижники depict the harsh, bitter truth, evoking the feelings of pain and compassion in the hearts of viewers. It seems there are no themes, situation, or images they did not touch upon, aiming to convey the truth no matter how harsh it might be. Like a magnifying glass, artists make clearer the reality, the painful details of which we have long ceased to notice, having learned to habitually ignore it as something entirely normal and ordinary. We may have gladly continued to ignore this issue, but the artist fixates our attention on it, not allowing us to be distracted by something else. Sometimes artists grew tired of serious themes and wanted to joke around, which by no means compromised their commitment to realism principles they chose. Look how much humor there is in Vasily Perov's painting, The Hunters at Rest. From the gestures and facial expressions of the characters, one can easily imagine their personalities and the subject of their leisurely conversation. There are so many shades of laughter in Ilya Repin's masterpiece, Cossacks Are Writing a Letter to the Turkish Sultan. One can examine this painting endlessly. Every character, every detail is found and portrayed with such authenticity and truthfulness that the viewer cannot remain indifferent. A smile is sure to appear on their face. What a gentle humor Vladimir Makovsky uses to depict the scene observed from life in his painting Without a Master. The intellectual efforts of rural children engaged in mental arithmetic are brilliantly depicted by Bogdanov Belsky. And how different all the pupils are. Look how precisely each character is featured on the canvas. To understand the problems of modernity, painters looked for their roots in the past, turning to the most important and pivotal moments of homeland's history. The remarkable artist Vasily Surikov dedicated his entire artistic career to the historic genre. Boyarina Morozova brings us back into the world of medieval Russia. It was a difficult time of the split in the Russian Orthodox Church and the subsequent divide in the society. There are so many personalities and faces depicted by the artist. It's no coincidence that Vladimir Stasov called it a choral painting. Notice how the face of Boyarina Morozova stands out against the backdrop of a diverse crowd. How precisely the master found this inspired character type. An indomitable fire burns in her eyes, revealing the readiness to even die, but never to betray her convictions. Another great canvas by Surikov, The Morning of the Streltsy Execution, is dedicated to a no less complex and significant period in Russian history. The artist refers to the time when the young Tsar Peter the Great began his reforms in the country, sloughing off the legacy of the past. The painter masterfully reveals the emotions and characters of those who must depart along with the outdated ancient Rus. Each of the characters here is individual and vivid. The image of old Russia is opposed by a new force embodied in a Tsar and the regular army standing in formation along the straight wall of the Moscow Kremlin. Understanding the importance and necessity of the reforms initiated by Peter the Great, audience of the painting empathizes with those whom these reforms did not spare, destroying them as the remnants of the past. It is as if Ivan the Terrible and his son Ivan by Ilya Repin was painted from life. Most of us know this painting under the title Ivan the Terrible Kills His Son. With psychological accuracy, the artist managed to convey a whole scale of emotions of the Tsar who killed his own child in a burst of uncontrollable rage. There's so much horror in his eyes, so much fatherly gentleness in his hands. We almost tangibly feel the remorse, despair, and the gradually dawning realization of what has been done. Here's another tragedy of fathers and sons, depicted in Nikolai Goe's painting Peter the Great interrogating the Tsarevich Alexei Petrovich. The renegade prince shudders the expectations and hopes of Peter the father. As a Tsar, Peter's choice is painful, but the verdict is conclusive. Religious paintings also proved to be interesting to the Peredvizhniki. Deep moral questions that troubled Russian thinkers and writers of that time could be reflected in these accounts. For example, the painting What is Truth? Or Christ and Pilate by Nikolai Goe. The dramatic story The Last Supper has an unexpected compositional concept. The painting Christ and the Sinner by Vasily Polenov is made with remarkable psychological and artistic mastery. We become witnesses to the scene described in the Gospel. The enraged crowd brings a very young girl who has stained her reputation before Christ, asking how she should be punished for her sin. However, Jesus, preaching love as the primary value of life, says, "Let him who is without sin cast the first stone." There's so much wisdom and humanness depicted in the figure of the seated Christ from Ivan Kramskoy's painting Christ in the Wilderness. He resembles a cultured persona of the mid-19th century, pondering over the choice of his own path and the fate of the entire people. It's interesting that Christian allusions can be found in paintings that seem distant from this genre. Take a look at Nikolai Yeroshenko's painting Life is Everywhere. We see the window of a prisoner transport wagon. It's evident that these people are being sent into exile, but during a stop they are entertaining a child by feeding pigeons. However, look closely at the faces of the prisoners. Don't you think that such faces are not typical for criminals? And even more, the young mother holding a child resembles the Madonna with the infant Christ, and the bearded man standing behind them looks exactly like Joseph. We see a clear resemblance with the classic depiction of the Holy Family. And what about the other three figures in the scene? Are these not the wise men who came before Christ bearing gifts? Therefore, the pigeons in this painting no longer seem incidental. The Holy Spirit itself is present with these people. Despite their profound respect for religious themes, artists condemned the church as an institution, which had discredited itself. Priests ceased to be the servants of God, transforming into greedy, deceitful, selfish, blind, and deaf functionaries of the church. The Peredvizhniki also turned to ancient Russian epic tales and folk tales. How mysterious and romantic is Kramskoy painting Mermaids? Sadko by Repin immerses us into the world of ancient legends. However, arguably the greatest artist of Russian epic themes was Viktor Vasnetsov. His bogatyrs are so authentic and lifelike. Their figures exude strength, power, and an uncompromising character. How heartwarming and authentic is his Alenushka, painted from a real peasant girl. Notice that there's nothing magical in this painting at all, yet intuitively we understand that this girl is a character from a Russian fairy tale, mourning her brother Ivanushka. And yet, it's amazing how the artist can depict folklore heroes as if he personally, with his own eyes, witnessed the knight at the crossroads, stood on a field after Igor Sviatoslavich's battle with the Cumans, was on a flying carpet, or was next to the grey wolf carrying Ivan Tsarevich and Vasilisa. All these paintings are highly appreciated by the audience. The Peredvizhniki left behind a whole gallery of beautiful portraits of ordinary people and extraordinary figures of their time. Thanks to these paintings, we can not only see their faces, but also grasp the essence of the heroes depicted on the canvases. Vasily Perov is the author of many magnificent portraits. The images of Russian writers, Dostoevsky and Ostrovsky, are the most famous amongst them. Ilya Repin is no less masterful in this genre. This is the portrait of composer Modest Mussorgsky, painted shortly before his death. We see both hopelessness and hope for a better future and an unquenchable flame of immortal genius in the exhausted, dying body. Leo Tolstoy was painted by the artist multiple times, each time revealing his personality from a new perspective. By the way, Lev Nikolaevich Tolstoy is an idol of his era. He was painted not only by Repin and Nikolai Goe, but also by Ivan Kramskoy, the leader of the Peredvizhniki, for whom the genre of portrait was the key one. It is noteworthy that the models for the paintings were not only extraordinary figures, but also completely unknown people. The numerous portraits of peasants and common people left to us by the artists are interesting and very characteristic. And here is the most well-known Unknown Woman by Kramskoy. The Peredvizhniki are also about realistic Russian landscapes. The pioneer of this direction is rightfully considered to be Alexei Savrasov, who presented his best painting, The Rooks Have Returned, at the very first exhibition of the Society. It struck viewers with its sincerity, authenticity, and the mood. It is no coincidence that Ivan Kramskoy, upon seeing this painting, remarked, "In all landscapes there is water, trees, and even air, but only in the rooks there is a soul." Probably many are familiar with the works of the great landscape artist Ivan Shishkin. Incredible knowledge of nature, brilliant skill, and most importantly, immense love for Russian nature allowed this artist to create true masterpieces, one of which is The Morning in a Pine Forest. The paintings of this master are like epic narratives of heroic scale, where the heroes are the trees and the native landscapes. Unlike Shishkin, Isaac Levitan had a better sense of the lyrical, subtle, and poetic beauty of the world. Many of his landscapes are built on semitones, conveying both admiration and enchantment. But almost always, the artist's images also evoke in us notes of nostalgia and melancholy. And sometimes viewers have a remarkable sensation that the paintings of this master even sound, and this harmony is wonderful. The landscapes of Arkhip Kuindji sound completely differently. The main task of this artist was to find such colors, create such a palette, so that the viewer would feel the light emanating from inside the painting. He managed to convey the grandeur, power, and depth of spaces through simplifying forms and avoiding excessive detail. This allowed him to create an effect of monumentality that is felt intuitively by the viewer. Do you know the wonderful Moscow Courtyard by Vasily Palenov? This canvas is saturated with light and sunshine. How much joy, sincerity, and love. The activities and creative aspirations of the Society of Peredvizhniki proved attractive even to artists who were not formally part of the group, but exhibited their works alongside them at exhibitions. There was one magnificent ethnographer and master of the military genre among them, Vasily Vereshchagin. He created numerous paintings that revealed character types, scenes from real life, and the beauty of exotic countries to the audience. He is also known for his series of paintings depicting military actions. The most famous amongst them is the Apotheosis of War, on the frame of which he left the inscription, "To all great conquerors, past, present, and to come." It's hard to miss another exhibitor of the Peredvizhniki exhibitions, the remarkable sculptor Mark Antokolsky. He reproduces the likeness of historical figures such as Ivan the Terrible, chronicler Nestor, and Peter the Great with astonishing realism. How magnificently he portrays their characters through poses, gestures, and authentic details of everyday life. What an amazing effect the sculptor achieves in his Mephistopheles. As you walk around this artwork, the changing perspective transforms the expression and mood of this literary character's face. Despite the edgy social content of their paintings, the activities of the Peredvizhniki were highly praised by Russian society at all levels. Artists could create without worrying about their future with the support of the first patron and a great art enthusiast, Pavel Tretyakov. It often happened that he acquired paintings even when they were still being created, not to mention that he would arrive first at every new exhibition, even before its opening, and would buy the paintings he liked. Therefore, visitors to the vernissages would often find such inscriptions on the works, sold or property of P. Tretyakov. This connoisseur and collector of Russian painting donated part of his house for a gallery during his lifetime and bequeathed it as a gift to the city and the state upon his death. Thanks to him, today we have the opportunity to admire the great works of talented artists. It's amazing, but one of the main competitors to Tretyakov in purchasing paintings was Emperor Alexander III himself. Later, his collection became the basis of the Russian Museum. Therefore, today, the two largest collections of Peredvizhniki paintings are housed in the Russian Museum in St. Petersburg and the Tretyakov Gallery in Moscow. The Society of Wondering Art exhibitions not only united Russia's cream-of-the-art community, but also proved to be a very enduring association. Born out of the Revolt of the 14 in the 1860s and 1870s, formally it lasted until 1923. During its existence, the Peredvizhniki organized about 50 exhibitions, tirelessly propagating the best humanistic ideas connected with the most humane aspects of human beings, bringing to the surface issues of moral and ethical choice, beauty, love, and of course, enlightenment. As Yakov Alexandrovich Tugendhold once wrote, at the core of the ideological and civil painting of our Peredvizhniki lays a purely Russian and profound cause, the illness of having a conscience. Certainly, a fitting motto for the works of those great artists would be that art should serve not only as a decoration and entertainment, but the essence of this art is greater, to stir emotions and provoke thought, and as a result, as cliché as it may sound, to help us become more pure, better, and kinder.